球預測颱風今晚最接近本港，多班航機要取消，唔少旅客滯留喺機場。澳洲冧山泥現場，救援人員救出一個生還者。歡迎收睇一節新聞報導。天文台目前仍然懸掛8號東北烈風信號。喺下晝4點鐘，颱風維克托集結喺香港以南大約120向北移動，時速18公里，直吹珠江口。天文台預測，如果維克托按照現時嘅途徑移動，會喺凌晨最接近本港。
根據維克托現時移動嘅途徑呢，就佢將會喺今晚凌晨嘅時分呢，就會非常之接近香港嘅。咁我就所有嘅市民呢，就應該呢而家盡速做好所有嘅防風措施啦。喺9點鐘嘅時分呢，維克托呢就係已經增強成一個颱風。咁並且喺11點鐘呢，就喺香港嘅南邊190公里，好穩定咁向住北呢，就以時速10就接近呢個珠江口一帶嘅地方。咁因颱風嘅逼近呢，風勢呢就將會下午呢就會普遍吹呢個東北烈風。咁而因為咁嘅緣故呢，天文台響12點正嘅時候呢，就掛咗呢個8號風球。
我哋記者姚建文而家就喺銅鑼灣㗎。姚建文啊，銅鑼灣一帶嘅情況係點呢？
係唔該晒。咁喺銅鑼灣避風塘呢度呢，呢度嘅風勢同雨勢都係非常之強勁㗎。咁所有嘅漁船同埋遊艇呢，已經係翻晒去避風塘度避風㗎啦。咁喺海面呢，亦都係見到維多利亞港呢係吹起咗唔少嘅白頭浪㗎。咁喺海面呢，已經差唔多見唔到冇船行走咁滯㗎啦。咁喺掛咗8號風球之後呢，唔少市民都係趕住翻屋企㗎。咁一切嘅秩序呢都係良好㗎。咁喺鬧市呢，亦都係變得特別冷清。咁至於九龍區方面呢，亦係有棚架倒冧嘅意外，冇人受傷。由黃昭榮報導。
改掛8號風球之後，雨勢同風勢都明顯咁大咗好多。橫風橫雨之下，有啲市民連遮都俾風吹爛埋。好多市民趕住搭車返屋企。民政事務總署已經開放咗35個臨時庇護站，俾有需要嘅市民暫住。喺強風吹襲之下，秀茂坪村30座外牆用嚟做清拆工程嘅棚架，部分喺朝早冧咗落地面，冇冧嘅部分都搖搖欲墜。當局派人用鏟泥車清理冧咗落嚟嘅棚架。而喺土瓜灣碼頭角道近北帝街，一個喺唐樓天台嘅棚架亦都被風吹歪。警方將唐樓對開嘅一條行車線封閉，避免棚架冧落路面造成意外。有線電視記者黃昭榮報道。
喺交通方面呢，告士打道嘅交通呢，而家係非常之暢順㗎。咁來回兩線呢，都係保持暢順㗎。咁由於風同埋雨呢，都係好大啦，咁啲車經過嘅時候呢，都係減慢咗車速㗎。咁至於其他嘅公共交通工具呢，喺懸掛咗8號風球之後呢，亦都採取咗特別嘅安排。咁其中所有嘅渡輪服務呢，而家已經係暫停㗎啦。咁至於青嶼幹線，亦都喺下晝2點鐘全線封閉。而巴士、火車同埋地鐵呢，亦都係維持有限度嘅服務。由張婉玲報導。
由於掛起8號風球，青嶼幹線需要全線封閉。一啲駕車人士就趁青馬大橋嘅下層行車線封閉前，揸車入去大嶼山。到咗下晝2點，管理公司嘅人員將啲路障打橫咁擺喺去大嶼山嘅行車線上。咁除咗一啲工作人員之外，所有車輛唔准進入。有啲司機嚟到都無可奈何，唯有出返市區。所有去東涌嘅巴士線已經暫停服務，咁即係話大嶼山同青衣之間嘅陸路交通已經中斷。而2條鐵路喺打風期間就維持服務， 地鐵嘅行車班次改為每5分鐘開出一班，九廣鐵路每4分鐘一班，輕便鐵路就10分鐘開出一班。咁至於巴士同電車，只係維持有限度服務。海上交通方面，天星小輪嘅港內航線、油麻地小輪嘅港內航線同離島線已經全面停止服務。由中環到愉景灣嘅渡輪服務就喺下晝1點鐘開始停航。咁至於行走香港同澳門之間嘅油麻地雙體船同埋遠東噴射船已經停航。有線電視記者張婉玲報導。
至於機場方面呢，亦都係受到颱風影響㗎，超過80班航班呢需要改飛第啲地方，或者係需要暫停㗎。唔少旅客亦都滯留喺機場。由曾楚群報導。
為免受到強風嘅破壞，機場人員就將離境大堂入口大部分嘅閘拉埋。有多班航機都因為颱風關係要延遲或者取消。由於暑假係旅遊旺季，好多旅行團都受到影響。好似張先生一家，本來諗住去廈門玩幾日，但係而家班機就取消咗。
揾個大地方行下啦。
去邊度啊？
都係喺香港噶啦。
會好掃興啊？
少少啦，請晒假噶啦。
呢一個領隊就同團友解釋翻旅行社嘅安排。
而家係唔飛啦，咁我哋嚟講亦都會係有一個呢，係即係少少啦嚇，咁啊就係當方補翻個位嘅車費啊，咁我哋就會每一部車啊，每一部車，咁我哋就會係俾翻係100蚊個位㗎嚇。
港龍航空就將所有嘅班機都取消咗，連去高雄集訓嘅香港手球代表隊都要延遲行程。
個計劃就會少1日啦，咁樣對我哋影響都有喺度嘅啊。有咩影響？我哋相信嚟講，可能比賽嗰度需要減少一場，或者再重新安排過咯。
雖然有咁多航班取消，但係喺機場嘅人並冇少到，有啲人仲一早就嚟到機場。
我哋喺屯門啊，所以咧一聽到話天文台就嚟會掛爆風球，我哋就預早搭車出嚟啦。
賣雜誌嘅鋪頭就特別好生意，航空公司呼籲乘客去機場前就先打電話查詢下航班嘅情況。有線電視記者曾楚群報導。
8號風球到而家已經懸掛咗超過4個鐘頭㗎啦。有關風暴嘅最新消息，請繼續留意我哋嘅報導。而家先交翻俾徐慧儀。
唔該晒。咁受到颱風影響，一般嘅蔬菜比平時貴咗1。
後一口氣咁樣唱，一連串咁樣唱，咁樣串燒咁樣嚟唱法，其實佢都唔係第一次噶啦，好多年前曾經都有過10分12寸，今次呢再緊要啲添啊！呢個足本呢其實有成18分鐘噶，今次首先俾個5分鐘嘅短版本你欣賞下先，屬於非常好戲嘅阿 Lam 林子祥有呢一首叫做《林子祥好戲連場》啊！風暴消息又嚟啦！8號風球現正懸掛，馬路上危機重重。馬路之友遇到任何困難或者疑惑，都可以打1872929。馬路之友24小時求助熱線，與你風雨同路。雷霆881馬路之友最強後盾 ，Shell 自可信賴。
香港天文台發出最新熱帶氣旋警告，8號東北烈風或暴風信號現正懸掛。8號東北烈風或暴風信號現正懸掛，表示預料本港吹東北風，平均風力每小時超過62公里。喺下午4時，颱風維克托集結喺香港以南約120公里，即喺北緯21.2度、東經114.0度附近。預料向北移動，時速約18公里，直吹珠江口。根據現時途徑，預料維克托將於今晚喺珠江口附近登陸，非常接近香港。維克托逐步移近，本港風力繼續增強，下午較後時間可能需要懸掛更高風球。因為海面非常大浪，市民應該遠離岸邊同埋停止所有水上活動。請各位盡快完成家中各項防風措施，將窗門鎖緊。如果有可能，請喺門窗背後加上橫閂，將膠紙條貼喺當風嘅大玻璃窗上，萬一玻璃破裂，亦都可以減少損失。同時清理水渠口嘅落葉同垃圾。請將汽車停放喺最安全嘅地方。請留意電台每小時15分、30分、45分同埋58分發出嘅最新天氣消息。切勿在屋內當風窗戶附近站立。將家私同貴重物件搬離當風嘅窗戶。請預早選定屋內一個安全地方，以防玻璃萬一破裂時可以躲避。光管招牌物主請注意，而家應該作出安排，截斷光管招牌嘅電源。再重複，8號東北烈風或暴風信號現正懸掛，下午較後時間可能需要懸掛更高風球。風暴消息報告完畢。
嘉德士為方便顧客，故此喺8號及以上颱風信號懸掛時，以下7個香港區加油站仍然不停為你加油，分別有英皇道、灣仔、成和道、海傍站、香港仔、筲箕灣同柴灣。嘉德士以你做 No.1， 不停為你加油。
美麗時光由美麗華旅運引發，而家時間係
4點32分。
美麗華泰國團暑期只收2799，乘直升機空中漫遊，全樂園、全美食，5星級酒店，超級享受。牌照號碼30695。
雷霆881商業一台新聞報導。
依家係由潘佩蘭報道新聞。8號風球仍然懸掛，颱風維克托目前集結喺香港以南120公里，以時速18公里向北移動，直吹珠江口。預料維克托今晚會喺珠江口附近登陸，非常接近本港。天文台稍後可能改掛更高風球信號。喺颱風襲港之下，港九新界發生多宗冧樹同埋冧棚架嘅事故，未造成傷亡。喺荃灣芙蓉新村，一棵15米高嘅大樹倒冧，壓住一部私家車，3個乘客被困，要由消防員救出。另外，青山公路近汀九有山泥傾瀉，出九龍嘅行車線封閉，駕車人士要改行屯門公路。喺8號風球懸掛之下，本港市面較平日冷清，部分商店仍然係營業，戲院嘅生意亦都唔錯。至於菜價就比平日貴咗幾成。另外，港島西營盤介乎德輔道西同干諾道西嘅正街一個建築地盤裏邊嘅天秤，由於有鋼纜被吹斷，不時擺動，情況危險，警員經已係到場戒備。澳門今朝11點掛起8號風球，氹仔新世紀酒店賭場就預期喺今日開業。警方喺酒店外圍加派人手駐守，着住避彈衣同埋荷槍實彈嘅警員以及酒店保安人員就喺附近巡邏，情況大致平靜。
泰國軍方證實超過5000個柬埔寨人同370幾個效忠柬埔寨第一總理拉納列嘅士兵逃到去泰國，批士兵並冇配備武器，佢哋聲稱第二總理洪森嘅部隊喺尋晚用重型武器攻擊佢哋，於是逃入泰國。呢節新聞報道完畢。
雷霆881商業一台。
藥不可亂食，說話不可輕信，長久證明幸福雙豐素安全有效，幸福良藥品質有保證。
天氣報告。
8號東北烈風或暴風信號現正懸掛，表示預料本港吹東北風，平均風力每小時係超。
啱喺4點50分改掛9號風球，咁即係話呢9號風球呢係9號嘅烈風或者係暴風信號嚟㗎，咁係顯示颱風維克托呢佢嘅風力呢正係顯著咁樣增加㗎。再重複一次，天文台已經喺4點50分改掛9號暴風或者烈風信號㗎啦。咁受到颱風影響呢，九巴公司宣布呢，除咗277線、A1、A2、A3 巴士路線，九巴嘅所有巴士路線喺下晝嘅4點9起呢就暫停服務，直至另行通知為止。重複一次，天文台已經喺4點50分將8號嘅東北烈風信號改掛為9號風球㗎啦。再有風暴嘅最新消息，隨時為大家報道。
到最新、最快、最詳盡嘅風暴消息，千祈唔好行開，繼續留喺雷霆881商業一台，最新嘅風暴消息即刻送上。
9號風球現正懸掛，馬路上危機重重，馬路之友遇到任何困難或者疑問，都可以打1872929。馬路之友24小時求助熱線，遠離風雨同路。
雷霆881馬路之友最強後盾 ，Shell 自可信賴。
香港天文台發出最新熱帶氣旋警告，9號暴風增強信號，9號暴風增強信號喺下午4時50分懸掛，9號暴風增強信號喺下午4時50分懸掛。根據現時途徑，預料維克托將於今晚喺珠江口附近登陸，非常接近香港。因為海面非常大浪，市民應該遠離岸邊同停止所有水上活動。請各位盡快完成家中各項防風措施。將窗門鎖緊，如有可能，請在門窗背後加上橫閂。請將膠紙條貼喺當風嘅大玻璃窗上，萬一玻璃破裂，亦都可以減少損失。同時清理水渠口嘅落葉同垃圾。請將汽車停放在最安全嘅地方。請留意電台喺每小時嘅15分、30分、45分同埋58分發出最新嘅天氣消息。切勿在屋內當風窗戶附近站立，將家私同貴重物件搬離當風嘅窗戶。請預早選定屋內一個安全地方，以防玻璃萬一破裂時可以躲避。光管招牌物主請注意，而家應該作出安排，截斷光管招牌嘅電源。岸邊同停止所有水上活動。喺過去1小時，大美督同長洲分別錄得每小時59同56公里嘅風速。再提醒你一次啦，香港天文台發出最新熱帶氣旋警告，9號暴風增強信。
From London, 24 hours a day. This is BBC World.
Hello, I'm Matthew Amreliwala with a summary of the world news. Rescue workers have pulled a man alive from the rubble of an Australian ski resort 3 days after a landslide swept away 2 lodges. A cheer went up as the man Stuart Diver, a ski instructor, was brought to the surface at Thredbo in the Snowy Mountains. 6 people are known to have died in the disaster. 13 people are still missing.
「總共有84班飛機要取消、延誤或者係轉飛其他城市，好多旅客滯留喺機場。」曾楚群報導。
為免受到強風嘅破壞，機場人員就將離境大堂入口大部分嘅閘拉埋。有多班航機都因為颱風關係要延遲或者取消。
Lay down on my stomach and made contact, yelled out. Rescue team working overhead. Can anyone hear me? There was a murder. We called for complete silence on the site, which we were given. I repeated the call and had a voice come strongly back to me. A gentleman identified himself, said he was in fine spirits and doing quite well, and uninjured, just extremely cold.
The overall rescue is not yet over. The hope is that if one person survived, there might just be others. Peter Biles, BBC News.
The Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat has left Gaza for Egypt for a meeting with President Mubarak. Their talks will focus on the crisis in the Middle East peace process, including this week's bomb attack in Israel. But Mr. Arafat still has to deal with problems within his own government. Almost all his cabinet have offered to resign in the wake of allegations of corruption and misuse of public funds. 16 of the 18 ministers have said they're prepared to step down. Mr. Arafat's office said the resignations would be considered at an appropriate time. 2 men of Middle Eastern origin have been formally charged in the United States with plotting a bomb attack on the Underground Railway in New York. The 2 named as Ghazi Ibrahim Abu Metza and Lafi Khalil were arrested at a flat in Brooklyn in the city, where police discovered 5 bombs. Federal investigators said a potential disaster had been averted. There's been speculation that the men are linked to a militant Palestinian group, but investigators said they'd not yet established any connection. Officials in Turkey say that an explosion at a wedding party has killed at least 3 people and wounded 20 others. They said a group of unidentified attackers were thought to have thrown a bomb during the party in the southeastern town of Cizre. The region near the Iraqi border has recently become the focus of increased Turkish military operations against Kurdish rebel bases. Military officials in Sri Lanka say they've successfully repulsed a counterattack by Tamil Tiger rebels. It took place in an area north of the government-held town of Vavunya. A military spokesman said that 4 soldiers and 1 police officer had been killed during several hours of fighting. He said 30 soldiers had been wounded and the bodies of about 100 Tamil Tigers had been recovered. Government forces are trying to open a land route through to the northern Jaffna Peninsula, which they control but are having to supply by air and sea. The Cambodian leader Hun Sen has urged the regional grouping ASEAN to help prevent a new war in his country. The appeal came in a statement released as the government entered new talks with an ASEAN team 2 weeks after the failure of the organisation's original mediation efforts. Cambodia has been in turmoil since Hun Sen ousted his co-prime minister, Prince Norodom Ranariddh, last month. Well, that's all from the newsroom for the moment. Join us again soon.
Hello again. We're looking first of all at the European scene. There's plenty of sunshine down across the Mediterranean once again. Indeed, there is for much of Western Europe too. But over central and eastern parts here you can see a fair amount of cloud. It's gradually moving eastwards, but that cloud is thick enough to give some fairly heavy bouts of rain once again. There'll be some thunderstorms over the Balkans and also across there into western Russia. Low pressure well in charge over many central and eastern parts. That's how the temperatures are going to look across Europe on Saturday then. Very hot once again. Down in the south about 37 degrees in Madrid and around about 32 degrees in Lisbon, 28 degrees down in the Canary Islands. But quite a bit cooler as you go into central Europe with all that cloud around. Perhaps only 20 degrees in Prague and 22 across in Warsaw. Into the Middle East now, you can see where all the cloud is coming out of the Ethiopian highlands. Plenty of cloud across the Arabian Sea coast as well. But otherwise it's hot. It's very hot in some areas. Near record temperatures in Kuwait recently and probably up to 47 degrees on Sunday. But the shamal is continuing to blow in from the northwest and there'll be other sandstorms blowing in across the desert of Saudi Arabia as well. Just 1 or 2 showers coming out of Turkey into the far northern part of Iran. Across in other parts of Asia then for the next couple of days, still some stormy weather around the Indochina area. Into Bangkok we'll see temperatures around about 34 degrees with some storms. And of course the monsoon continues to rage across in Delhi. The temperature there about 32 degrees. Bangladesh also seeing some more heavy rainfall. Across in Tokyo, some showers about perhaps, but staying very hot and probably mainly dry come Monday. But we have got some tropical storms and particularly Victor. That's now making landfall across the South China Sea coast close to Hong Kong. It's brought some very heavy rain and some strong winds already. It'll continue weakening as it moves further north though inland. That's the situation then just now with gusts of 120 kilometres an hour. It will, of course, weaken as it moves inland. It'll still give some torrential rainfall, and it'll give some pretty strong winds too as it moves across those southern parts of China in the next 2 or 3 days. Well, that's all from me then. Goodbye for now.
Finding your way through modern life can be a struggle, but at least there's one thing you can depend on. Every weekday at 18:30, meet the people behind the personalities in Hard Talk. There's a chance to sample world living at 19:30 with the best in leisure and lifestyle programs. At 2000, BBC News Desk brings you breaking news, analysis, business and sport from around the globe. World-focused documentaries challenge and inform at 21:30. And there's news on the hour, every hour to keep you in touch. Wherever you are, you'll know where you are with BBC World. Behind the scenes of British rule in Hong Kong with Chris Patten, The Last Governor, next on BBC World.
Wherever you live, there's nothing quite like the thrill of travel, whether it's just a weekend away or a month-long adventure. BBC World's Holiday promises to lift you out of your seat and off to destinations from Japan to the Seychelles, from beach to piste, on land or sea. We'll not only tell you how to get there, but what to do when you arrive. So please join us every week on holiday at these times on BBC World.
This is BBC World. Now we continue our series charting the last 5 years of British rule in Hong Kong and follow Chris Patten in his work as the last governor.
Britain's colonial police training for a riot. With 2 years to go before the handover to China, Chris Patten was once more in conflict with Beijing, this time over his decision to tear up a battery of repressive laws that were at odds with Hong Kong's Bill of Rights that came into force in the wake of Tiananmen Square.
The emergency powers have been on the statute book since the high days and holidays of colonial rule. They were last used during the '67 Cultural Revolution riots. It's inconceivable that a governor today, with a democratic parliament at Westminster looking over one's shoulder and international opinion, could ever use them. Equally, I'm pretty convinced that they are in contravention of the Bill of Rights. So at some stage, I want to take those off the statute book. It would certainly be embarrassing if we left them around and they were used at some stage in the future.
Patton had little doubt about Beijing's response.
I think the Chinese will blow a gasket. They will say, you just want to create chaos. What you want to do is to go around unloosening all the screws. That's their present line.
From Hong Kong's perspective, the 1997 handover suddenly seemed very close, especially to men like Dick Lee, who was now a very senior police officer.
I'm responsible for formulating policy on major operational issues like illegal immigration, internal security, anti-terrorist, major disaster, major incidents.
Only 2 years before, Dick Lee had been anxious about China's brutal approach to law and order. But now, in private, he worried more about Patton's decision to loosen the screws.
Certainly that people want to take away our powers. In some areas, perhaps they think we might abuse the power given to us. Of course, we need to have code of practice. We need to have rules to govern how we use these powers. And I don't see any problem after 1997. As long as our force remain professional, I don't see the problem at all.
On the surface, the other side of the border seemed to mirror Hong Kong. Shenzhen, the colony's alter ego, was likewise all concrete and glass. But that was only the image. China's hostility to democracy and freedom seemed now to breathe down Hong Kong's neck. Not that the economy was in trouble. On the contrary, Britain's last significant colony was booming as usual, a mecca for investors from all over the world. But that was not the point.
Every visitor would tell you, no, Hong Kong is a vibrant place. Things are going, you know, the economy growing, everything. But working here, you can feel that a lot of your fellow workers are on the edge of breakdown. You know, sometimes you feel that on a bad day, all you have to do is to light a match and the whole house would blow up. There is this sort of tension. We are going berserk. There is no doubt about it.
A little over the top, perhaps? Not according to Dr. Leung, a distinguished surgeon and one of the colony's most respected public figures.
Inside, there's a tension, there's a fear. There is definitely a sense of pressure. People look very cool at this point in time, and I don't think this is really the genuine feeling inside. I think this is only the tip of the iceberg, that's all.
Dr. Leung shared the unease he detected in others and was quite clear about its source.
The fear of uncertainty, we still don't know what is going to happen at the end of the day, because a lot of people now goes into China. They can see things in China that they're worried about.
That worry found a symbolic focus in the new China news agency, Beijing's de facto embassy in Hong Kong. Demonstrators carry the coffin of human rights to China's doorstep. Free for the moment at least to make their point against Beijing, they protest at what is happening on the mainland. There, under the benign gaze of Chairman Mao, Tiananmen Square is peaceful. With 2 years to go before the handover, there's a clock that counts the days and the seconds until China regains Hong Kong. Beijing chose this moment to release a film, a crude piece of propaganda against a famous dissident. His offense, to campaign for democracy and against dictatorship. In 1995, he was yet again accused of subversion, and yet again found guilty. His trial took 1 day. His sentence, 20 years. In Hong Kong, Margaret Ng joined in protest against a system where untold thousands of people live in fear of state repression. Her anxiety was that Hong Kong might go the same way.
This is a depressing place. People don't want people like me. I'm not going to be able to find a job. What I'm doing, I'm doing mainly two things. Namely, I have a private practice at the bar and I write. No one is going to print my articles. No one is going to offer me any column. I increasingly feel that I really ought to go. There is nothing to stay for.
The newspaper for which Margaret Ng writes had recently been bought by a good friend of Beijing. Critics claimed that the paper had trimmed accordingly.
Press freedom is much more vulnerable now because of the fact that so much of Hong Kong news has got to do with China. So you're going to have to send your reporters to China. They have to go there all the time. And if they go there, they're very much exposed to very physical and personal danger. In those circumstances, then the editorial staff have to think very, very hard about how they're going to use the news story.
The prospect that Hong Kong's media would be stifled after the handover was by no means a source of dismay to everyone. Indeed, some tycoons appeared to relish the thought. By no means all the rich and powerful were indifferent to freedom or cowed by China. Jimmy Lai, for example, starring in his own advertisement for his own brand new paper, The Apple Daily, and well pleased with the result. Jimmy Lai is a self-made millionaire who smuggled himself into Hong Kong as a child in the bottom of a boat. Jimmy Lai was streetwise and worked hard. Soon he had capital, and then he saw his chance in the mass market. Clothes that were cool but cheap.
Giordano was opened in 1981 with $5 million, and now it's worth $4 billion, and we have over 300 shops in Asia. So it's a great growth. Every year we average 30% growth.
Then he founded a weekly magazine called Next, hugely successful, always outspoken, outrageous. In 1989, after Tiananmen Square, Jimmy Lai used Next to denounce the Chinese premier, Li Peng.
I was very mad, and I wrote a very nasty and rude open letter to him. And in the letter, I call him the son of the turtle egg, yeah, which is very rude. I don't want to translate it.
China exacted immediate retribution by ordering the closure of Jimmy Lai's Giordano store in the center of Beijing. In Hong Kong, it was even worse.
I got bombs thrown into my house. I got people came here, ransacked my computer, and I got people threatening me. I got this and that, but I'm safe. I'm happy.
To save the company, if not his skin, Jimmy Lai resigned from the board of Giordano. But 2 years before the handover, he was on the offensive again, this time with the Apple Daily. Crime, gossip and scandal, plus a crusade for freedom and democracy. As he prepared for the launch of his new paper, Jimmy Lai had one simple message for his readers about Hong Kong's future under Chinese rule.
Just don't have fear.
The Chinese University in Hong Kong, a report on college life in America by the girl who had led the school trip to China.
Since I'm the first one from Hong Kong, so they pay much more attention to me. They always ask me questions. Oh, that's like the game that I play in Montreal, this one.
Norris Lam was now at university.
I learned how to express my feeling more openly and how to think. Sometimes we didn't have time or we didn't learn how to think in Hong Kong. We just try to memorize all the things on the book. What I believe is that we need to think independently, not just like follow people's thinking. Yeah, it's like the first time I saw snow.
She was a carefree student, except when she thought about China.
If they really destroy our own system, Hong Kong is not anymore like, our beautiful or lovely Hong Kong anymore. And then the way of living may be totally changed, and I might just go away if it's not my home again.
governor was endlessly out and about. His message to Hong Kong, trust yourselves, trust me. It means meet the people walkabouts. Patton's surprise visits did not endear him to local officials, especially when he descended on the poorer parts of the city where Hong Kong's elite seldom chose to venture.
We started by going to 3 temporary housing areas, and we discovered that in one of them, the water to the lavatories hadn't worked for months. You know, it's a small thing. Well, it's not a small thing if you're having to go to the loo in a public block and there's no water.
Patton's district visits were calculated to remind Hong Kong and Beijing that democracy was not dangerous.
I won't go in by back doors. I won't skulk around in order to avoid crowds or demonstrations. You know, we've got to keep order and stop innocent people who aren't protesting getting knocked over or hurt. But we've got to give people a chance to have a round.
Hey, keep quiet.
I think that the process of them feeling that they can put their case directly to the person at the top is quite an important safety valve.
Over 200 police officers force the residents go to the street, and now they are become homeless.
But most of the residents have accepted rehousing.
You try to shut off dissent, and you fetch up with more explosive situations, and you fetch up with people being hit over the head.
The Patton walkabouts also served to burnish his image as the governor who cared.
How are you?
How are you? How are you?
Now, tell me how long you've been living here.
你喺度住咗幾耐啊？住咗31年。31 years.
31 years.
啊，咁你喺邊度？喺入咗廚房啦。
Oh, thank you. Can I have one?
Although it attracted little attention outside the colony, Patton used Hong Kong's wealth to increase public spending, not dramatically, but enough to consolidate a degree of public support that any Western leader might envy.
Bye.
And everybody I visit, about twice a year, we invite them all back to Government House so that they can see my house.
That must be very encouraging.
Well, I know it sounds a bit awful, but
it does.
No, I mean, I mean, they come and have a cup of tea and have their photograph taken and look at the garden and, you know.
At the same time, in another part of town, a very different visit was underway. Lu Ping, Patton's opposite number in China, was once again back in Hong Kong and once again pointedly refusing to meet the governor. His contact with public opinion was strictly confined to a gathering of the faithful. With the tycoons and their allies among the politicians, he could be confident that no one would raise uncomfortable questions about dissidents or human rights. Patton was unimpressed by the performance of the Chinese leader. The governor was also contemptuous of those British officials who wanted him to be more understanding of Beijing's decision to snub him.
Oh, well, you've got to make allowances for the fact that they're Chinese. I mean, people here are Chinese, but they're perfectly civil and courteous.
Another British envoy had just touched down in China to be greeted as a conquering hero. Michael Heseltine, the president of the Board of Trade, was here with a delegation of British industrialists eager to do business with the most populous nation on earth. Heseltine and his team at the DTI were irritated by the conflict with Beijing over Hong Kong. Although there was no tangible evidence, they feared it would undermine Britain's trading prospects with the vast but largely untapped market in China.
I have, of course, heard of the remarkable changes that have taken place.
The contrast between Heseltine's warm words and Patton's disdain could hardly have been plainer. Although the governor admired Heseltine's flair, he was dubious about such a high-profile mission.
I think it's increased the strength of some people's feelings that there is a cornucopia in China waiting to flow over our slippered feet. If only we would recognize the importance of, quote, restoring good relations with China, unquote. billions of business waiting to be done if only we show our sincerity in our dealings with China over Hong Kong.
Although Heseltine was entirely loyal, the Foreign Secretary was only too aware that the President of the Board of Trade was exceedingly frustrated.
Michael Heseltine sees this immense market growing at a huge rate. He sees the Germans and the French powering in huge delegations. He wants to do the same. He's extremely good at it. And Hong Kong is an impediment to that process. It's something he accepts. It has to be dealt with and so on. But it's impediment to what he sees as a huge opportunity. I think I'm correctly analysing his view.
Although Heseltine did not deviate from Britain's official line, Patten suspected that he had some sympathy with a Whitehall school of diplomacy, which the governor deplored.
Patten's frustration with the Heseltine visit was fueled by another conflict with China, this time about the rule of law. For week after week, the two sides have been wrangling about the status and the powers of the Court of Final Appeal that was to replace the Privy Council as the final arbiter of the law on July the 1st, 1997. On this occasion, though, there was a compromise, to the outrage of the Democrats.
For quite a few months now, they appear to be standing firm on principle in trying to give us some democracy and trying to defend our rule of law. And suddenly, I found a whole bunch of them on their knees, kowtowing to China, accepting everything, and telling the whole world they're so happy now that there is an agreement.
The deal with Beijing confirmed China's right to exclude all so-called acts of state, treason, secession and subversion, from the jurisdiction of the Court of Final Appeal. The power in these critical areas would thus lie not in Hong Kong, but in China. The Democrats feared that the Chinese would exploit their authority over acts of state to crush dissidents in Hong Kong, just as they did on the mainland.
What is clear is one thing. Whatever may or may not be an act of state is not to be determined by our courts. It will be determined in Beijing.
Patten claimed that Martin Lee had simply missed the point.
Ever since the basic law was drafted, the context within which a court of final appeal was going to operate in relation to acts of state was clear. That isn't changed one bit by the agreement that we signed this summer.
But Martin Lee was not about to back off.
If he continues this line of appeasement, he can expect nothing but attack from me. It's nothing personal, because I want the Hong Kong governor to be defending Hong Kong, not betraying Hong Kong.
The frustration is to have the argument turned to issues on which one can't give reassurance. If Martin spends the next 2 years saying it is all going to be hopeless, Hong Kong is finished, it's a disaster, I can give my opinion on that, which is maybe sometimes matched against his, but I can't stop people in this community and elsewhere becoming either excessively fatalist about Hong Kong or excessively pessimistic about Hong Kong.
There was no doubt that Hong Kong cared greatly about human rights, but Patten worried about what would happen if or when the crunch came. Would the people and the government find the resolve to stand firm against any infringement of their autonomy promised them under the slogan, "One country, two systems"?
The glitter of Hong Kong life disguised a mood of uncertainty as the colony prepared for its first ever real election. What was the point in standing for an election denounced by China? It was not an academic question for the barrister Margaret or for Christine Lowe, who had been appointed to the Legislative Council by Patten 3 years earlier. They discussed the dilemma with a friend, the journalist Jonathan Mirsky.
A year ago, the Chinese passed a resolution in the National People's Congress that on the 1st of July, they would liquidate the entire political structure here, including the